what does it take to actually, because I think most people can relate to whatever, like I'm experiencing a symptom in my body, and I somehow have a sense that it's not just like a malfunctioning of my system, but like I think the step of how can I start uncovering what is actually beneath that, or what it's connected to, in a way that stays kind of grounded in reality, where it's also not like, oh, I'm just making things up, or oh, that must be connected to whatever, but like really staying connected to what is actually going on, like not adding layers of thought on top of it. Like, for example, what I really know, what I, like many people I know, do is like go look up a book where that connects like symptoms with physical symptoms with like certain whatever spiritual problems, and I'm kind of skeptical of that, because I think it's a bit more complex than that. So like what do we need to do what you did in this example, like to start connecting a physical challenge with whatever is beneath that?
Right. Yeah, so there is no ABC, no 3 steps to do that. So, but I think that the basic ingredient at first is curiosity, and curiosity always comes with an open mind. It comes with a place of, oh, something is happening here and I don't know yet. And also and I'm willing to learn about it. I'm open to be informed about the situation, because if I think I should already know, I'm already closing down the situation. So I can actually use a book like you just described to give me the first hints, because maybe I feel something and I have no idea. Then just being curious about it also can feel disorienting, because I'm curious, but I don't know what to make of it. So I also need kind of like a structure, or like a railing along which I walk. And then maybe it can be, I get it from a book, or I get it from a conversation, or I maybe do a meditation and have an intention to kind of receive or be informed about something. And then whatever I take, I can always use it as the next step in the journey. And also to not look, okay, how to fix the situation, because then I'm also not really curious and open again anymore. But I'm already trying to find a certain outcome that I think should be better, or that I think is better. Because when I experience a symptom, mostly all of us feel like, oh, this shouldn't be there, and it would be better if it would not be there. If just that issue, that pain, that challenge, that troubling situation would not be there, it would be better. But that's mostly when we are in the symptom and we don't yet find the space or the curiosity to see, what can I actually learn from this? Because then every situation becomes an opportunity to make something conscious, or to learn something, to develop something that is new, that is fresh. And then so also what you said is very important, to not do this just as a mental idea, or like through the imagination, because then I can imagine, yeah, probably my grandfather, and I'll give it back to him and now it should be solved. It's more complex than this, and in a way it's even more simple. It's not really what you do. It's like if you find the right kind of connection to something, it starts to happen by itself. But you need to be willing to invest energy before. And especially when we look for, like, let's say, for relations or causes of things that feel a bit like I have no idea where they come from and what happens, or I show symptoms. This we know quite well, like that there's people that show symptoms of having had a certain experience without ever having an experience of being assaulted or abused, or gone through very troubling or situations. So you kind of see all the symptoms, but you don't see where does it come from, and then it feels like something's wrong here. And then it's very hard for people, because then you feel like something's wrong with myself, because this makes no sense. So I'm weird, or I'm just crazy. And then, so when you open then the situation and you start to see, if I place these symptoms into the lives of some of my ancestors that maybe have gone through certain experiences like that, it starts to make sense. And that is a huge relief, because I feel, okay, I'm not just crazy. I just need to open the horizon, or the game board on which I look how things are connected. And then it starts to make sense again. And then you see how life in a way is still trying to work out something. And it maybe has been passed on through the generations until it appears in your life right now. And this we also know quite now, even through scientific studies, that there is many ways how really life passes on these informations of strength, resilience, and of trauma over the generations through the biological mechanisms, through the epigenetic transmissions. And then there's a lot of other ways how this gets passed on from one generation to the next. So when I start to connect this, something is already starting to happen by itself. Then it's not so much, so what am I gonna do? But it's more like that I'm available to this, to honor it, and to feel it, how it affects me now. And the process of looking in itself is already incredibly transformative. Because normally what we do when things are hard, either in ourselves or even in the family system, we don't quite want to look, because it's too shameful, it's too painful, it's too demanding, it's challenges a certain idea that I have about myself or somebody. So we kind of don't want to deal with it, which is the first step of just how people kind of cope with something. At first, you kind of keep it at distance. And sometimes people don't manage to find the way to look at again in their own lives. And then sometimes it's the second or the third generation that has the capacity to look. And then when we do that, when you kind of really, you look beyond the things that you've been told, or the things that in a way make it appear like it was in a certain way. It's not so dramatic, or it wasn't like this, or your father never was, or your grandfather was always a good man, or whatever the situation is. Like these simplified frames of that's how life is. When you start to look a bit further than this, it means we really look. And then a lot more information is available. And there is this old saying that the truth will set you free. It's more complex than this, but there is also there's a big truth to that. When you start to see something, even if it's hard, but getting to see, like we all long for truth and to see what was really happening, or what was really going on. And then there's like, then I can work with it. But what is really hard is when we feel I just have a sense, or like my body tells me that something is going on, but I have no context to work with it. Then we feel we're alone with it. If I put it into the context of my family or my ancestors, for example, suddenly I'm not alone with it. Again, I have a tribe that is affected by something, and now we're working it out together. And of course, it's super helpful to have, like in real life, to have support around it, somebody else, therapist or a group of people, like again, like a real tribe that helps me to look at something that's hard to face otherwise.
Yeah, and also a tribe or a group of people that helps me ground myself in this different perspective on life, because it's not like mainstream culture view that the challenges that you're facing uh, are an expression of something your ancestors went through. They're like unrelated problems that you just gotta fix. So like having a group of people that helps you, mm, yeah, stay in this frame, stay in this understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I know for myself is when I start seeing things in a different way, but no one around me does, I like tend to slip back into these old ways of looking, because it's also kind of scary to see things differently than everyone else around me. That's again lonely.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then the other thing that came to mind while I was listening to you, which really touched me, was mm, hmm, my sense is that we're living in a time where a lot of old stuff is coming up. And I think I'm curious to hear from you, or to have you speak on like the intelligence of when things come up. And just like what came to me while listening to you was like an appreciation for the fact that probably most of my ancestors just really did not have the freaking space to be with the child, like to be with their inner challenges and go through them. And that in a way, there's also an intelligence in the fact that they didn't look at it. Like it's not wrong or bad, or they were too shallow or whatever, that they didn't look at this, but that the focus of life had to be in a different place.
Exactly.
And then the flip side is, yeah, and there were things there that could not be seen and integrated, that now me being part of whatever the lineage of my ancestors, now I get to contribute that part. But I have the strength that all my ancestors passed on to me, because they survived. Like they were actually able to deal with really challenging situations. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And just the way you described it in a way already expresses a more mature way of looking at our family, because it's very easy. So we're either as a child, we're totally bound to this is the way it is. So what you hear and how people behave is the world. So you don't even have maybe you have feelings about it and you don't feel comfortable. And I think our body always notices when something is like incongruent and something is a bit weird, like when something is being spoken, but actually there's a lot of other feelings in the room. When some people say it's all fine, we're all good, but actually there's a lot of tension in the room. Our bodies and our nervous systems always pick up on that. And as children, we do feel that a lot, and then feels like weird. And then as a teenager, then often like you start to maybe confront this or look through, and then, but they often comes with a lot of judgment or rejection of like, how come they never spoke about this? And why you never told me this? And how come you never looked at this yourself? And so on. And maturing means that I start to see, I understand, just as you described, why for you, maybe there was no chance to actually start speaking about this. And I can understand the intelligence and also the tremendous challenge in that, or like the struggle in that, like trying to make a life. And at the same time, I don't have to fully agree with it. Yes, I also see it was necessary then, and there is a different possibility right now. And this puts me into a place of being a responsible adult looking at my family. And maybe everybody knows in a way like the archetype of, let's say, the quiet father, or like a bit mute father, or the man that is a bit shut down, or you don't get quite a word out of him, like you don't really know what moves him, like this kind of like an archetype we also know in our culture a lot, or it's changing a bit now already. But and so then you can just see like, all these men, they never talked, and they don't know how to touch their emotions, they don't know how to be a real father, and so on. So it's very easy to criticize that. But when you get the backstory of it, that for example, after wars or very troubling situations like migration or very challenging economic situations that happened in the history of humanity very, very frequently, when you go through something like this, the main priority is not emotional vulnerability and openness. The main priority becomes survival and protection then also of the family. And so often focus now on men, there's a story for women as well in there. These men had to cope with something, with unbearable stuff, maybe when they came from war. It's like horrendous. And then not talking about, or talking was just not an option, because there was so much shame, so much pain, so much overwhelm with it. So the best they often found was to kind of bury that somewhere, not even think themselves about it, and just go on with life and make as good a life as possible. But of course, it has all these consequences then of like cold family atmosphere, or maybe eruptions of violence here and there, or abuse of alcohol or other substances, or like addicted to work and things like this. But when you then start to see, this was somehow, for this period of time, the only possibility of going forward to actually contain and move forward with life, it creates a kind of respect. And that respect gives you access to also the strength that was in that decision or in that mechanism. It's not something that was wrong. It was necessary then. And we can see it now that it maybe still, it affected me if I'm the son of such a father, or the grandson of standing in the lineage of something like this. It had affected me because it created norms, it had created kind of belief systems, it had created kind of ideals and how to be, and also anger and pain. But I can connect to the power that was in there and start to make my own decision about that. And I reconnect with the strength, and I also can embrace the pain in a different way than they could. So I'm still healing something that came even long before my own life. And it always brings like a certain quality, like there's more energy, and also like it opens the heart in a sense, or like it creates even a sense of meaning in life.
Yeah, and what just comes to mind is, so first the thought came, it's almost like healing the past. Well, it's like like my understanding of time becomes really different, because so, say my father went through things, and because of that, kind of embodies this archetype that you just described. By me being able to see that, see the strength in, him doing that, like the intelligence in it, and then me being able to look at the things he wasn't able to look at, it's almost like because of that, what he did becomes even more meaningful, because it fulfills like from a larger life perspective, it fulfills its job, and it doesn't become like a and for the rest of his life or the life of the whole family, uh, there was established a certain culture of communication where you know you couldn't talk about things and so on and so forth. But it's like, well, for this time that he went through, he had to do this, and then someone else came and was able to like take it to the next step. And that's really beautiful. It's a very different way to look at it than I previously had in my mind.
Yeah. And that's also like a principle of, let's say, healing is not just that something then disappears. Something, when something really heals, it's like it integrates, and also life gets richer, and everybody has learned something. When you went through a crisis, it's one thing is being healthy. It's great to be healthy and fit, and most people don't appreciate it while it's happening. When you go through a health crisis or any form of crisis, and you know how hard it can be, and then you find the right steps, you kind of change something, you kind of you get the lesson, and then it changes. So again, you're healthy, but you're not just healthy as before, you're healthy and you appreciate it, and most likely, or actually always, you have learned something. So it made you richer, and that's when people live a very long life and worked with it. It feels like you also got wiser. It life enriches you through going through the challenging and demanding times of life. And sometimes this can happen in one life that you can go through that process, or sometimes it's not possible for certain reasons. But the opportunity, like it is as you described, is still there. So maybe this happens in the next generation, or in 2 generations further down the line.
Mm.
So, and again, this is then the perspective that looks at the challenge not as like, I wish it wouldn't be there. And of course, we all know that. And we'll go through that multiple times. And also we can see like, wow, this brings me to a place I would normally not go to. And if I take on the challenge, it can also enrich me, it can teach me, and actually I can learn something fundamental about it. Um,
Yeah.
and it always makes you kind of more available to life, because life is not just great and healthy. Life is also full of pain and challenges and cycles of life and death. So you get more open to the whole movement of life. That is very nourishing for us human beings, because we're not here just to have a good time. We're here to have a good time and to grow also into those things that are challenging.
Yeah. Yeah, and this view on life can only happen if I'm not fully preoccupied with surviving. So basically for me this perspective of like, oh fuck, another challenge makes sense when I'm worried about my own survival, because then every challenge is like a, you know, another danger of dying. Whereas, you know, in our times, at least a much larger percentage of the population does not necessarily need to look at every challenge that comes in as like a life-threatening thing. So then what you're saying can start to unfold.
Right.
And I see, oh yeah, I can actually this notion that I wish this would have never happened becomes less true.
Yeah, and there's like for, let's say, a trauma or overwhelming stored experiences to heal, I need resources. I cannot do that without being in some kind of relative safety, depending on what I'm working through. So I always need some kind of amount of safety, grounding, resources, sufficient support in order to work through something. And then even now, like you said, like we're living in challenging times and things are coming up. I think it's actually very interesting, because I see this a lot, like through this COVID crisis, I see that a lot of ancestral issues are being triggered because, again, we are going through kind of a global experience that to that extent hadn't happened for decades. There were always other things, but not this kind of thing where we all in a global situation where like things are threatened or insecure. For some, it's really their health, the health of family members, economic security, and there's a lot of more limitations. You cannot travel. There's a lot of things you cannot do. You cannot, sometimes there's a curfew. You cannot go out. You shouldn't meet your friends. And while our cognitive mind, let's say, mostly can understand why these things are there, maybe we argue with it, but there's kind of a, yeah, this is the situation now. There are deeper layers that get triggered that kind of start to resonate, that often have to do with previous, let's say, war experience in our ancestry, or like collective crisis moments from that our ancestors went through, where there were also things like this: limitations, death, curfew, not being able to go out, the borders being crossed, locked, and things like this. And this feeling of like, oh, will there be enough? Like what happened at the beginning of the pandemic, that a lot of people went to this kind of a frenzy of stocking up stuff and toilet paper and other things that we then kind of made fun about. But these are very real energies that are triggered. And so in a way we have an opportunity, I also think, because it's so these things are triggered. There is some similarities, but of course it's very different. We're not living in a war right now. And there is, for most people, still a relative security. Of course, it differs for wherever you live. But then you can actually take that possibility of being in a different situation and still allow what comes up to you. So it gives life like another opportunity and another chance. Because a crisis is also the thing that makes something actual. Like this information was always there, but a crisis kind of suddenly like highlights or like puts the like an acupuncture needle into something, and then oh, the stress and the pain that's stored there comes out. And it's a real opportunity because these things were there anyway. All the things that we see right now going on the global stage of fighting for resources, this increased polarization, people having a hard time talking to each other, they're not just entirely created by the situation, they are also highlighting something that was previously there, but didn't feel so actualized or so hot. And now it's there. And so we have an opportunity to discern what is really going on right now and what are things that come up from my history, personally, but also from our collective history.
Yeah. What would you say do we need as resources to be able to see things like that? Because I can see myself, well, I'd say increasingly be able to see this, but also very often just getting lost in the drama of the whatever is going on without having that perspective. So what helps you, but also what will you say can help other people to kind of step into this perspective?
Yeah, I think the things that we need are the things that we need for every other situation in life that's challenging as well. It's like basics. And one is that I need a practice to work with myself. I need kind of like either what I do, like a body practice and also a meditation practice, something that I can come back to what's really going on here, because it's so easy to get lost out there. So what do I have? What can I do? And what do I kind of work with, ideally daily, to come back to myself, feel my body, to feel my breath, and to kind of clear what's happening in myself. And something that helps me, like as a spiritual practice, meditation or prayer or whatever people do, to put me in touch with a larger perspective of life. that is not just the way I look at life, but also it gives me a more of a sense of space that I'm here and I'm experiencing something. And it's like a bit like widening my horizon. Suddenly I'm not just here in my life, but I can take a breath even in a challenging moment. So that's one thing that's very, very fundamental. And I think another super strong support is to have like-minded people or practice community or maybe a therapist or a group that I can connect with, where we can share such practices and where I can get support and also co-regulation and yeah, like I get support in those places where it's hard for myself to connect. Somebody else can be there. And I think overall, again, it's a kind of a certain willingness to be in life and to be also exposed to the things that are challenging. And again, like to cultivate that place in you that wants to learn, that is curious and that is dedicated to grow every day a little bit more and more, and that is here for something. Yeah, so I think there's a lot more to say, but this would be the first basic. So it's first a practice with myself and also an environment, if I can create it, that supports me practicing those things that I actually feel I want to grow with.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to emphasize this point because it often surprises me how powerful it is to be able to name something I'm experiencing in the presence of someone else. Like it's just very different than doing it by myself. And I have some friends where we've really established the practice of when we connect, we just take some time where each person just gets to express whatever is going on, and the level of relaxation and ability to connect and yeah, like it's kind of sinking internally, like okay, it's incredible, really really makes a
So,
big difference. And
so just to emphasize that again, like community is so powerful.
mm,
And if a community has people in there that are also connected to themselves and know how to practice with themselves and bring themselves in with all the challenges and the willingness to hear each other and be there, it's enormously powerful. And there is a certain um, level of healing or integration that we cannot do on our own. I think it's totally impossible. And we can only go so far. Like in my life, where I am right now, I would never ever be able to be there just working with myself. It's absolutely impossible. I'm the work of
mm,
so many thousands of hours of people supporting me. I am supporting other people and coming together in this kind of spirit and share. This is what helps me grow as a human being and as a man
yeah,
tremendously.
yeah,
And again, this is already often the remedy, like what we said before, to the way that was how survival was in old times, where it was possible only through not talking about it because it would have been too overwhelming and everybody was in there. So if everybody is drawn in their own trauma, then nobody can talk to each other, nobody can support each other. So and then it feels like true when people said it's best you leave the past behind, you don't look at it, and you just walk forward because it creates some kind of orientation in life. But now we're most of us in a time where this is not the truth anymore. So there are people that have at moments more capacity than I have, and I can connect with them. Maybe it shifts the next moment. I can hold space for you,
yeah,
and we all grow together. And suddenly, everybody's growing, but also the system
Yeah.
tribe is growing, and we get stronger and stronger, and we get more and more to see what is possible. And this is maybe an answer to what you said before, why things are coming up. There is a certain principle in life that when something challenging wants to come in, it needs the right kind of resource and the right kind of containment so that it can even appear. Otherwise, it creates just more symptoms. So when people come together and you form kind of like a stronger tribe or a stronger container, more things can go up. So in a way, you invite the next level of integration and healing by forming a stronger community together. And that's how we get more and more alive in a way, because what was bound previously just in symptoms suddenly becomes energy that can become creativity or new things that we can do together.
Yeah. Just one piece that I find fascinating, that I think has shifted quite a lot in like maybe the last 1-2 years, is yes, I grow, or it helps me to share my challenges, but also I learn when I witness others in their challenge. That's really, I mean, kind of when I'm in the survival mode, every challenge that I get to hear, or every time I hear that someone else is facing something, it's like, oh my God, again, I have to kind of think about how I allocate my resources in a way that I somehow manage. But when I'm in a space where, I feel grounded, then being with someone who is going through something,
Yeah.
that it's like the boundaries start kind of becoming less clear, of like, oh, this is like his challenge and I am the one who is supporting him. It's more like we're together in a space where there's resource to be present, and there's challenge. It sorts itself out and everyone kind of benefits, actually. And it's not anymore this like I sacrifice myself so that someone else can somehow feel a bit better.
Exactly. Yeah, that's where we go from the story of the isolated self to the story of interdependent, co-created world where the tribe is always together. Like there's in indigenous cultures, there is some stories sometimes where they said if one person has a problem, it's the tribe's responsibility. Whole tribe has a problem. And so everybody gathers, and it's not just, oh, he's the one having trouble and now we need to fix him. They know we all need to get together because this is a problem and a challenge that we all have. And again, it's also an opportunity. And then the tribe goes together through rituals and practices and doing stuff until the one person kind of displaying the symptom um, doesn't have to display that anymore.
Mm.
And this is also in families very often, that when there is strong unintegrated aspects in the family history, that there is one person in the second or third generation or somewhere suddenly, often already as kids, starting to display certain symptoms. And then our more individual self worldview says, this child or this person now has a problem. But the other story of an interdependent system worldview says, something is being shown to us here. And that takes often the blame of the one that says, we need to fix you, away, and takes it back into the focus of like, we have a task here, something needs to be seen, and we have an opportunity. Something now has become visible. And often people that are even coming to work like this are often the ones that in the family kind of, for whatever reasons, said like, yeah, I'm gonna pick on this thing that nobody spoke about but can only be felt, and often it can be felt or experienced through the body. So often it also becomes physical health symptoms. And I'll make sure it's going to have attention again. And then it's about the family being able to relate to this. And if the family is not so available for this, then we can create, like in a work like this, we can create community again, where there are eyes and minds and hearts and bodies that are willing to listen to this and are willing to be exposed to this. And then it creates another, it gives it an opportunity. And things are sometimes really magically moving that feel like it's hard to explain, even having effects on other members of the family. Because if one person in the system changes something, it affects the whole system. Sometimes these effects are very obvious, sometimes they're not so tangible or not so concrete, but still everything changes. And it's very paradoxical, as you said, that when we come together and we listen to this, like in this training for men, you hear sometimes very beautiful stories, but you hear also very heavy stories. And the paradox is not that it does not confirm the old story of like, oh, don't look at the past, it will drag you down, or like now everybody will cry, or it will just be overwhelming for everybody. And if it's done in the right way, it actually makes everybody lighter. Because when the truth is spoken, it fills us with like also kind of grace, and it feels meaningful. And I actually feel grateful that you shared that with me or with us. And now I have more energy to listen to some other story, and I get the confirmation that it's possible, that somebody wants to and is willing to hear that. And this really changes this thing of like, oh, I have to sacrifice myself for you. No, when you bring something in that's difficult for you and we create space for it, we all go enriched out of this conversation.
Can you tie together what we've been talking about with the ancestral power training? I mean, let's say not all the threads, but at least some of them, in like what we're gonna do, and yeah, how what we've just been talking about can be basically done in this training.
Right. So what we're going to do in the training is, first of all, create a community, like a tribe that is committed to stay together and to look at our individual and our collective roots as men. That means to look at our biological family systems. And so we create first even the space that we have trust and kind of a commitment together, so we can even take on this work. And then what we're going to do is step by step kind of mapping out the territory of our root structure, our family system. So we'll go step by step, starting with parents and the grandparents and so forth, to get even first an orientation. The first part in this work is just to gather information. And this is already a huge work for some people, just to get oriented in this. Where do I come from? You know, there's a reason why certain families are very articulate about like creating a family tree and things like this, or in traditions or cultures, like you always have the patriarchs and the mothers and the fathers like hanging on the walls. There is a reason to this, because when I know, then I can also relate to the energy. So this is the first step, that we start really getting informed. So everybody will go through their own process. And so you bring in information that you can find like through times and situations that happened in your family. But then there is the other part that we do in this work together, is to also open to the information that doesn't come through researching kind of the outer information, but to research it through your own attunement to your body and to the moments when we connect and share and go through practices, like to open in a way to the intuitive information that maybe you didn't know you know, but will become more and more available to you. And that kind of flashes out the, the story just not from ghosts that live somewhere, but makes it really alive, that these were people that lived full lives. And then there is a big process of differentiating. So what are the unique qualities and resources, strengths and powers that you can draw from in your family system? And also what are the unique challenges and traumas or things that were still there, like difficult legacies? And again, just to have an overview, but then you go not into like everything. It's not about like having to integrate and heal everything. You are informed, and then you can kind of more and more feel and choose what is it that speaks to me, what has relevance to my life as a man right now, what maybe I can even connect to as challenges in my health, my relationships, my family, my relationship to my career or to money. There's often very like base themes that are connected to family systems: money, health, sexuality, property, the right to really own something, to really relax into having a place, to or to really go for what I want to do. So it's not just abstractly going into the jungle of your family history, but it's finding the resonance that is relevant for you right now as a man. And in this also what we find through the work, and we do this really step by step, is to find the right relationship to the qualities and resources. How can I honor that by living it in my life? What do I want to uphold, and what maybe is a good way to actually really um, um, kind of honor in my life by even finding a physical place in my house that honors my ancestors, by passing on the stories to my children if I have children. What's an honorable way to be the son of my family?
Mm.
And also, what is the right relationship to the things that feel difficult, overwhelming, hard, unintegrated, and so on, that I feel maybe ashamed, that I cannot talk about, and so on. And right relationship to my family in general, if my parents are still alive, and so on. And it's not just like how far away or how close do I need to live with them, but what is the real and the right emotional connection and relationship I need to have with them for now, because this is often a process. Sometimes I need to be further away so that I can come back closer at another time. And sometimes maybe I've been living far away and thought this has nothing to do with me, and actually it's good to pick up the threads and see how we can pick up again to even have conversations and communication in a renewed sense. And so there's kind of like a trajectory that we're going through together, but it also is a very individual journey for everybody, like where everybody feels, where it pulls you, what's really hot and needed for you right now, and what kind of themes you're working out more. Um, and then throughout, of course, just being in contact with other men, it creates this kind of community that feels more and more supportive to also, I can kind of lean into the presence of others when I'm going through something difficult. Yeah, and then what always happens there, what I find very touching, is that more and more also not of just my personal story, but also of our collective journey of man becomes visible. And what this has to do, or what is is telling us about how to live as a man right now, how to raise our boys, how to relate to the women on the planet right now, or through my to every other man that I meet. So there's many questions there that gets a different context again when we put it into the bigger space of where we come from as men together. Yeah, so if this speaks to you and you feel like joining a tribe of men going into such a journey, the training starts 19th of April, and I'd be really happy to have you on board and that you bring in the strength and the resources of your unique family system into our journey, and we can all learn from your particular challenge and what you're struggling to integrate, the way how we learn together.